Welcome to the Ambient iPad. In this video, I'm going to use the Roland Boss RE-202 Space Echo to do some Mellotron sound-on-sound looping. The signal chain is the Mellotron M4000D Mini. Its master mono analog output goes into a Boss volume pedal. The output from that goes into the Boss RE-202 Space Echo. That goes into the Universal Audio Volt 276 interface, which then goes to the iPad Pro. I'm using GarageBand, which I use a lot for external sounds. Very straightforward. Minimal amount of effects, very light compression on the input, spatializer to expand the stereo field a little, and then at the end of the chain I have FAC Maxima as a limiter and just to raise and even out the volume. So in order to do sound-on-sound looping with this unit, stock it's just a second of delay, almost a second, which you can control via tap, as well as from the delay, the rate knob. But to get a longer delay than that, you have to put it into longer delay mode, and then you really have to tap it out. So to put it in long delay mode, disconnect the power, get that, hold the tap button down, then put the power back in. Once the tap light flashes, you let go. And now you're in a setting where you can change a bunch of different things from a systems perspective. So we go to 11 on the mode selection knob, and this is where you change it from that standard 1-second delay to the 2-second delay. I have it on number 1, which is already for the 2-second delay. If it was on manual, that would be that stock setting. Now, once you do that, you just press tap, and now we're back into the unit and can use it. Just a little tip here, I find it easier for a longer delay to have it on head 1 and just do the 2-second delay. Then, once you have that, if you change it to head 2, you then get 4 seconds of delay, and if you change it to head 3, you then get the 6 seconds of delay. So once I had all the settings I want, I just put it into memory and then it's all set. But right now we're in manual mode, so wherever the knobs are at, that's what we're going to get. So I just want to demonstrate. This is a great unit, other than the sound-on-sound looping. I mean, it's a Space Echo. So just let me get some stuff going here, make sure I got the settings right. And I'll be using a bunch of different classic Mellotron sounds today, the violins and flute from the Mark I, choirs, woodwinds from the M400, and I'll just go through a bunch of different kind of phases with that looping. But here's just a demonstration of the settings I have here on the Space Echo with the 3 violins. You hear those classic repeats? That's very Space Echo-y. And one more. So a great pedal in its own right, whether you're using it for sound-on-sound looping or not. Let me demonstrate what the looping is like. So let me turn this off, get it to the preset that I have. I should also mention that I'm trying to keep this as pristine as possible, which is hilarious because, as I said before, the repeats really get into a territory where they start to degrade fairly quickly. There is some control you can have over it. Let's get a short loop going and see what we've got. Let me make sure I got enough time here. We'll just use the violins. Got to turn it on now. All right, let's turn that off. Now, even though I've turned it off, I can still change the knobs and it will change the loop. So right now I have this at about 1:30, 2 o'clock. Any higher than that, it will get into self-oscillation. So we've gone through about 3 or 4 repeats. You can hear the sound degrading. Will not do any wow and flutter unless I turn that knob up, which I'll do just to demonstrate in a bit. but the sound gets kind of compressed. The low end goes, the high end goes, and you do get this mid-range woody sound. Now you can use the bass and the treble to control the frequency of the repeats, but it still degrades. There's only so much you can do. And the volume is staying a little steady. It's slowly going down. Let me add in some wow and flutter here. So that's now imprinted on the loop. So, and you know, you can do traditional tape echo wildness here, so I can get that intensity up, put the high end up and the low end. Now I'll turn the volume of the repeats down because it's just going to get louder and louder. Now we can go the opposite direction, make it really dark. Add all the reverb in. I have this set to, you have a number of different reverb types that you can use, and you change those in the same way that we changed from the short delay time to the long delay time. I'll turn that down a bit, and let me just get this back so it'll actually start degrading. Excuse me, it'll just kind of go down in the background. And where was I? I don't even remember what I was talking about. The reverb, yes. Comes with the spring reverb on. I actually have the spring reverb going for the Mellotron. I typically, it's got a spring, it's got a room, it's got a plate, a setting called ambience, and a hall. So you get 5 different settings that you can change the same way again in that startup mode for the system pages. I have this for the Mellotron set to the spring. The plate is my favorite. I think that sounds the best, but with the Mellotron, the high end just gets really crinkly and distorted. It just doesn't work well at all, but the spring does. When I did the bass version of this kind of looping, the spring doesn't sound good at all, but the plate does. So depending on the instrument that you're using, you may need to experiment to figure out which reverb will work well. And that's essentially it. What I'm going to do for the jam is I'll start with the violins. Again, I'll loop the violins. I'll do a oboe solo over that, and then the next loop that comes out of that will start with the oboe, and I'll go through the woodwinds. And then I'll do some choir soloing over that, and then the final part of the looping will be the choirs, and I'll do some Mark II flute soloing over that. And so let's see what we can come up with for this jam. Now, the one thing is let me get this down, and I got to reset this. All right. Get this back here. I'm only changing the knobs. I have this on a memory setting, but I know for a fact that a couple of the knobs are not exactly where I would want them, and I haven't taken the time just to update that patch. So, and again, the most important thing is to remember where the intensity knob is. And once the loop's going, I'll turn that down so it will slowly degrade or degrade a little faster than it is at the setting it's on while I solo over that. That was a lot of fun. I typically like to use a more pristine delay for sound on sound looping so that I have a little more control over the repeats and the way that the sound degrades. When you're using particularly a tape echo like the RE-202 Space Echo, you kind of just have to roll with it. There's only so much control you can have depending on how the settings are. And even then, like I had it on the new tape sound, I had the wow and flutter completely off. I added a little high end and kind of cut the low end a bit, but the way that the repeats work in those long delay on the sound and sound looping with this unit, it definitely compresses the sound and kind of slowly gets rid of the low end and the high end, regardless of how you have those knobs set. The one thing I really like about this pedal, using it in this way, is that while the sound degrades, it's not adding wow and flutter. Something like the Strymon El Capistan will degrade the sound quicker and also adds that wow and flutter. You can't get rid of that. At least on the Space Echo, as long as you have that knob down, yes, the sound degrades from a frequency response perspective, but it keeps that wow and flutter out. Now, you can add as much as you want and imprint it onto the loop, but in order to try to keep as pristine a sound as possible, I'm just at least trying to control some of those parameters that you actually can, because there's so much, as you heard, little artifacts and the sound just kind of going off. And it's always because I'm trying to keep the volume somewhat steady and control that, turning it down when I'm doing the soloing, but keeping it at about 1:30 or 2 o'clock on the knob. It still is kind of pushing right up to self oscillation, and I could hear a couple of times those repeats were getting distorted, and then that gets imprinted onto the loop. So if you want a lot of control, an old style tape echo, even in a modern machine, is probably not the way to go, but it sure is a lot of fun. Thanks for watching, thanks for listening, and good luck with your own music.